Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today we've got, I believe this is our 6th video in our installment on Drydock. Today's video we're going to talk about a major class issue and why it's a space that we look at, but hopefully it won't be a problem for us when we go into Drydock. So we're going to climb down into the peak tank today, which is where the absolute thinnest metal on the ship is, and it's where New Jersey has a known corrosion issue. So we're going to go through this hole down into the peak tank, and I'll see you down there at the water line. It's time for Scary Stories with Ryan. My biggest recurring nightmare from working on museum ships, my last museum ship, Taney, had a power outage that persisted for about a week. And there was a known leak at the shaft alleys that was dripping in, and we basically had a bucket there to catch it, and we had a little submersible pump that would pump it out. With the power outage, that pump wasn't doing it. So I would go down there periodically with a flashlight and just sit there in the shaft alleys and listen to the water leak into that ship. I still have that nightmare some nights. On Taney, the issue was that water had leaked into the ship and in the past, and the interior watertight bulkheads were no longer watertight. So when the water leaked into the shaft alley, it was able to go from there and continue to spread forward through bulkheads that should be watertight. On New Jersey, I'm not worried about that with the shaft alleys because there's plenty of watertight doors back there that we can close, and there does not appear to be the same kind of corrosion that would cause water to be able to propagate. And that's not a corrosion issue. It is that fiber that's wearing away over time. Up here, it is a corrosion issue, and if this space floods, it will continue to corrode. This is the equivalent space on New Jersey where I would expect to see that. On Taney, this isn't our shaft alleys. We did a video a couple weeks ago in the shaft alleys, but this is the space where I expect to come down and be in complete darkness and just hear water leaking into the ship. So right now we're sitting at roughly the water line in the peak tank. This is one of the breast hooks that we're sitting at. It's the extra layers of steel that are added in here, more or less at half deck heights here at the bow of the ship. By design, the Iowa-class battleships have extremely thin steel plating forward and aft of the armored bulkheads. So frame 50 is the forward armored bulkhead. Frame 166 is the aft armored bulkhead. The spaces outside of that are extremely thin. This helps save weight, and it means that if we get hit by an enemy battleship's armor-piercing projectile, it'll put a hole in this side of the ship, it'll go straight through, it'll put a hole in that side of the ship, but it won't explode. So it'll leave a nice round 14 or 15 or 16-inch hole that's easy to plug, easy to repair, as opposed to blowing a big jagged hole that then warps all the decks and things like that. So by design, for a ship that's supposed to last 20 or 30 years, it was a good idea. For a ship that we're trying to preserve long term, the bow of the ship, right here where we are, has the very thinnest plating of anywhere. There's no triple bottom up here, there's no torpedo defense. That is the exterior bulkhead of the ship. And you might be able to see the weld bead here on the bulkhead. As part of the design, at our normal designed waterline, there is a thicker piece of steel. The problem is New Jersey is sitting considerably lighter. So the very thinnest piece of steel, which would normally be permanently submerged, is now the ship's winged waterline here at the bow. This is a known class issue on Iowa-class battleships. In fact, Missouri patched a hole up here at the bow. It was roughly this big when they chipped all the scale out of it. It was big enough to put your hand through when they were in Drydock in 2009. And so other museum battleships have had similar issues in similar parts of the ship. Now, Missoura's wasted faster than ours has. We're sitting in fresh water. They're not only sitting in salt water, they're sitting in warm salt water, and they're constantly having their wind water line interact with the oil that's leaking out of Arizona. So they are in a significantly more corrosive environment than we are, which is why they had to go into dry dock. Holy cow, it's been 14 years already. But earlier than we did, because they developed this hull. Now, when the Sullivans went down about a year ago, was that April of 2022? I think, maybe 2021. I looked at the thickness of a Fletcher class shell plating and our own thickness up here. And on an American fast battleship, our hull is 1/16 of an inch thicker here at the waterline than it is on a Fletcher class destroyer. So assuming we have corroded the same amount as USS the Sullivans, a ship sitting in fresh water that was built and commissioned in the exact same year as New Jersey, then we would be down to about 1/16 of an inch of plating up here at the bow, as opposed to, I think we're 5/16 here and they're a straight 1/4 inch. So that is not a lot of material. This space is designed to be flooded if you need extra weight at the bow, although it's normally left dry. In previous videos, we've mentioned that we have to flood spaces at the bow. As of now, the plan is not to flood the peak tank. It is too thin, it is too difficult to get in here and dewater. We're going to flood some of the tanks that are designed to be permanently flooded with fuel or ballast water, as opposed to up here at the peak tank. And it's not enough water to make a major difference in lowering our bow as much as we need to today. My absolute biggest fear is that water somehow gets into this space, whether it's condensate because it's so humid or that we develop a leak somewhere. If that water gets in here, it is going to be held up against these frames. Remember, we're out of trim 10 feet to the stern, so the ship is like this, with the bow being high, which means water will run as far back as possible. It'll sit against these frames and be held against, listen to that. Listen to how thin that is. It'll be held against the shell plating of the ship here on the inside, and that is what will corrode through eventually. Now we are 20 feet below water, and we are all the way at the bow of the ship. In fact, that is the inside of the casting that forms that bulbous part at the very bottom of the ship, which was once our paravane tether, where the chain for the paravane would have attached. I've mentioned it before, New Jersey is the only one of the 4 Iowas that had that cut off. It's because of the corrosion issues between this cast plate and the rolled steel around it, which is metallurgically just different enough to basically form a battery and corrode because of electrolysis up here. In fact, if you look in here, you can see some of the plate where they cropped out that original piece and welded in a new, thicker piece. So this is the other one of the known class issues associated with the peak tanks of Iowa class battleships that we want to be sure that we take a look at. We are almost at the very bottom. There's 2 more levels below us, about 4 feet in total, but it gets so tight that there's no room to film there. You can't actually see the bow particularly well. This bulkhead, which has these relief holes cut into it to save weight, is coming down the center of the space, just gives it a little bit of extra structural strength, which is important because this is all so lightly built that it's nowhere near as tough as the rest of the battleship. Now, it has opened up side to side down here because the ship flares out underwater, and that helps make the hull more hydrodynamically efficient. So, the other known issue is the corrosion here at the extreme bow of the ship. And I only make it down here maybe once a quarter to inspect this and make sure that it's still dry and everything's still good. One thing that you notice when you come down here is that it's very little corrosion and a relatively fresh system of coatings in the entire peak tank. I get the impression that they came down and sprayed a relatively high build epoxy in these spaces right around when the ship was decommissioned. And it really goes to show you that the last crew of the ship in 1990, 1991 really thought she was going to be brought back into service, and they treated this because it was a known issue. And that has really, really benefited us in the long term because we don't have any leaking up here yet. And well, we inspect it, we know it's going to be an issue for us one day. It is not an issue for us yet. So going to Drydock now will make it significantly cheaper to restore this whole area than it would otherwise. When we go into Drydock, because there isn't any leaking here on the inside or any significant corrosion, we're not going to touch the inside of the ship. We can always come down here and spray it when we're pier side. We're going to specifically look at the outside of the ship, right here at the bow, around the peak tank, the wind water line, and here at the extreme prow of the ship. We're going to blast it to white metal, and we're going to put a really high build coating or system of coatings on this known to be thin steel, just so that we can avoid some of the problems that we've seen on other ships. It's unfortunate that other ships have leaked here. It could have happened to any of us. It's unfortunate it happened to the museums, it did, but it does serve as a warning to the rest of the fleet that we got to deal with this now, or we're going to look just like the Sullivans or just like Missouri with that hole in relatively short time. That's why your support to this project is so important. Your support is going to allow us to raise enough money to sign the contract with the yard so that we can go in and remediate these problems when it's still preventative maintenance and not when we actually have to do emergency repairs. They're going to be 3 or 4 times as expensive as it is now. So there's a link in the description below if you'd like to continue donating to support this project. We really appreciate that. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. We really appreciate your support, and we wouldn't be able to make it into the yard without it. You can also support us by liking, sharing, subscribing so more people find out about this ship and our project. Thanks for watching.